Hey, this is the Apsara Tales channel where we share real stories with unexpected twists. If you enjoy the video, make sure to subscribe and give it a like. It really helps our channel grow. Now let's dive into the story. I have been working at the company for several years, but my career felt like it was stuck in place. No matter how hard I worked, no matter how much I put in extra hours, I just couldn't seem to break through to the next level. The competition was tough, and it felt like there was always someone else who was either more impressive, more connected, or just luckier than me. I wasn't miserable, but I wasn't exactly thriving either. I wanted more. I knew I was capable of more, but I had no idea how to actually move forward. My boss, Olivia, was a woman everyone respected and feared at least a little. She was in her mid-40s, sharp, professional, and incredibly strict. She never shared anything personal at the office, and no one knew much about her outside of work. Some people speculated about her personal life, but there was never any real information. No mention of a husband, no photos on her desk, no casual conversations about weekend plans, just work, and she expected the same level of dedication from everyone else. It was a regular Wednesday evening, and I was exhausted. Most people had already left, but I had stayed late to finish up a report. When I finally packed up and headed toward the elevator, all I could think about was getting home, taking a hot shower, and maybe having a drink. Before crashing into bed, I stepped into the elevator and leaned against the wall, rubbing my temples. Just as the doors were about to close, Olivia walked in. "David," she said with a small nod. "Miss Carter," I replied, standing up straighter. The doors shut, and the elevator started moving. It was just the two of us, and I felt the usual tension that came with being alone with your boss, especially one like her. I never really knew how to act around Olivia. She wasn't rude, but she wasn't exactly friendly either. She was a kind of boss you respected, but didn't joke around with. We rode in silence for a few seconds, and then suddenly the elevator jerked to a stop. The lights flickered, and a second later, everything went dark. "What the hell?" I muttered under my breath. Olivia, completely unfazed, pulled out her phone and turned on the flashlight. She pressed a few buttons on elevator panel, but nothing happened. Then she sighed and hit the emergency button. A crackling voice came through the speaker. "There's a citywide power outage. We're aware of the situation, but it might take a while before we can get the system running again. You're going to have to sit tight." "How long?" Olivia asked, her voice steady. "At least an hour, maybe longer." I felt a can form in my stomach. Being trapped in a small metal box wasn't exactly my idea of a good time, especially not with my boss. I wasn't claustrophobic, but something about being stuck with no control over the situation made me uneasy. Olivia sighed again, leaning against the wall. "Great," I exhaled slowly, trying to keep calm. "So what we do now?" She glanced at me, then at her phone. We stood in silence for a while. I could hear the distant hum of the emergency light, the occasional muffled sound from outside. The shaft tom seemed to stretch. I shifted on my feet, feeling restless. "So, do you think this will mess up anything important?" I asked, just to fill the silence. Olivia gave me a look as if considering whether or not to engage in small talk. "Finally," she said, "probably not, but I had a meeting in the morning that might need to be rescheduled." "Right?" I nodded, awkwardly clearing my throat. Another long silence. "You seem nervous," she said suddenly. I laughed, but it came out a little forced. "I mean, yeah, it's not every day you get stuck in an elevator with your boss." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't say anything. I shifted again. "Do you get nervous? I mean, ever?" For a second, I thought she was going to ignore the question, but then she tilted her head slightly. "Not often." There was something about the way she said it, calm, direct, almost like a fact rather than an opinion. "Must be nice," I muttered. She glanced at me again. "What makes you nervous?" I hesitated, not moving forward, feeling like I'm stuck. The words came out before I really thought about them, and as soon as they did, I realized how true they were. It wasn't just this elevator, it was my entire career, my entire life. She didn't say anything right away, just studied me for a moment. Then, to my surprise, she nodded slightly, as if she understood exactly what I meant, and for the first time since the elevator stopped, I didn't feel so trapped anymore. The silence in the elevator stretched. I checked my phone again. No signal. Olivia seemed completely unfazed, standing with her arms crossed, waiting. Meanwhile, my brain wouldn't shut up. It wasn't just the fact that we were stuck, it was that we were stuck together. After a while, I shifted, trying to break the tension. "So, you've been in a situation like this before?" She glanced at me. "Once, a long time ago." I expected her to leave it at that, but then she surprised me. "I was in college, got stuck in a subway car for 2 hours. People were panicking, but I just sat there and waited. Figured there was no point wasting energy on something I couldn't control." I smirked. "Sounds like you." She raised an eyebrow, but didn't disagree. I leaned against the wall, looking up at the emergency light. "You don't seem like the type to panic." "I don't." She tilted her head slightly. "You do." "I wouldn't say that," I muttered, even though my nerves were obvious. "You seem tense," she observed. "Well," I exhaled, "it's not every day I have a one-on-one meeting with my boss in a broken elevator." That made her smile just slightly, but it was the first time I'd ever seen her look anything other than serious. I hesitated before speaking again. "Can I ask you something?" She gave a small nod. "Why do you keep everything so private?" "I mean, no one at the office knows much about you." Olivia studied me for a moment, then looked away. "Because work is work, personal life is personal." "Yeah, but Even the most private people let something slip now and then. She smirked slightly. And what about you, David? What do people at the office know about you? I thought about it. Not much, I guess. Exactly. She looked at me again, her gaze sharper this time. You keep your personal life to yourself too. So why ask me? I rubbed the back of my neck. Fair point, she sighed and leaned against the opposite wall. But if you really want to know, it's easier this way. People expect things from you when they think they know you. I frowned. Expect things? She hesitated, then for the first time she looked like she was actually debating whether to say something. I've had people assume they can get something from me. She finally said that my success means I owe them something, or that I should be generous. She didn't spell it out, but I understood what she meant. I nodded slowly. That's frustrating. She let out a small laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. You have no idea. I hesitated before speaking again. You mean guys? She gave me a sharp look, but there was no anger in it, just a kind of tired amusement among others. I thought about that for a second. Olivia wasn't just successful, she was powerful, and I could see how that power made people assume things about her. That sucks, I said finally. She smirked, very eloquent. I chuckled. I'm just saying, I get it. People don't always see you for who you actually are. She studied me again, longer this time. Then to my surprise, she nodded. Exactly. I shifted on my feet, feeling like I just crossed some invisible line. I get it too, I said. I mean, not in the same way, but I work my ass off and still I feel like I'm stuck in place, like no matter what I do I can't move forward. Olivia's expression softened just slightly. And you think you deserve more? I shrugged. I think I've earned it. A long silence stretched between us, then she said something. And never expected you probably have. I blinked. Wait, what? She exhaled. I've noticed your work. You're one of the few people who actually puts in the effort, but effort isn't always enough. The right people have to notice at the right time. I scoffed. So it's luck sometimes, she admitted, and sometimes it's about knowing how to stand out. That stuck with me because that was exactly my problem. I didn't stand out. I did my job. I worked hard, but I never did anything that made me impossible to ignore. I opened my mouth to say something else, but before I could, the elevator lights flickered back on. A second later, the motor hummed and the car jolted slightly before starting to move again. I let out a breath. I hadn't realized I was holding Olivia glanced at her watch. Well, she said, pushing off the wall, looks like our little conversation is over. I nodded, still processing everything she'd said. When the doors opened, she stepped out first before I could follow. She paused and glanced back at me. Think about what I said, David, and then she walked away, leaving me standing there feeling like I just learned something important, something that might actually change everything. The elevator incident stuck with me. It wasn't just the fact that we were trapped, it was the conversation. Olivia had never spoken to me like that before. Hell, I wasn't sure she had spoken to anyone like that at work. She was always strict, professional, all business, but for those 40 minutes in that stuck elevator, she was different, and now I couldn't stop thinking about what she'd said. You've probably earned it. Those words played on repeat in my head over the next few days. I kept working like usual, but something had shifted. I started paying closer attention in meetings, speaking up when I had something to add. Instead of keeping my head down, I made sure my ideas didn't just get thrown out there, but were actually heard. And then on Friday afternoon, something even more unexpected happened. I was at my desk finishing up a report when I saw an email pop up in my inbox. The subject line was simple: let's talk. It was from Olivia. I hesitated for a second before clicking on it. David, if you have time after work, stop by my office. I'd like to discuss something with you. Olivia. That was it. No details, no explanation, just a direct, straight to the point message. I leaned back in my chair, my mind running through every possible reason she might want to talk to me. Did I screw something up? Was she going to address our conversation in the elevator? Or was this actually about work? I tried to stay focused for the rest of the day, but it was impossible. By the time the office started emptying out around 6, my nerves were shot. I finally took a deep breath and made my way toward Olivia's office. Her door was closed, but the light was still on. I knocked twice. TC, come in. I pushed the door open. Stepping inside, she was sitting at her desk, but her blazer was off and she looked less like the untouchable boss I was used to. She gestured toward the chair across from her. Sit. I did. For a moment, she didn't say anything. She just studied me like she was trying to figure something out, and she leaned back in her chair and spoke. You've been more engaged this week. I hesitated. Yeah, I guess so. She nodded. Good, that's why I asked you here. I straightened slightly. All right. She exhaled and tapped her fingers against the desk. I've been thinking about what we talked about in the elevator, about how hard you work and how hard it is to stand out. I didn't say anything, just waited. Opportunities don't always come knocking, David. Sometimes you have to take them yourself. I frowned slightly. What are you saying? She tilted her head. I have an open project, something that requires extra hours and extra effort. It's not an official promotion, but if you handle it well, it will put you in the right position for one. I blinked. You want me to take on more work? She smirked slightly. That's one way to look at it. The other way is that I'm giving you a chance to prove yourself. I thought about it. This was exactly what I had wanted a shot to stand out, and it wasn't like I had anything else going on. No girlfriend, no kids, nothing keeping me from putting extra time. I nodded. I'll do it. She seemed pleased with my answer. Good. She reached for a folder on her desk and slid it toward me. This has all the details. Take the weekend to look it over, and we'll talk Monday. I picked it up, flipping through the pages. It was a big project, way bigger than anything I'd handled before, but it was the kind of thing that could actually make a difference in my Career. I looked back at Olivia. Thanks for the opportunity, she nodded, but then before I could stand up, she said something unexpected. Also, I was planning on grabbing a coffee to tomorrow morning. If you're free, you're welcome to join. I froze for half a second. Coffee with Olivia? I wasn't sure if this was still a work-related thing, or if she was actually inviting me to something more personal. She must have noticed my hesitation because she added, if you're busy, no pressure. I shook my head quickly. No. I'm free. She gave a small smile. All right then, 10 a.m. that cafe across from the office. I nodded, standing up. I'll see you there. As I walked out of her office, my mind was spinning. This wasn't just about work anymore. This was something else, and for the first time in a long time, I had no idea where it was going. I barely slept that night. The invitation to coffee wasn't just coffee. It felt like something else, something I couldn't quite define. Olivia had never asked me to meet outside of work before, and the way she framed it, casual with no pressure, made it feel even more significant. By the time I arrived at the cafe Saturday morning, I was a mix of curiosity and nerves. I spotted Olivia immediately. She was already sitting at a corner table, dressed in a dark sweater instead of her usual business attire. She looked different, relaxed, less like the untouchable boss and more like a regular person. I approached and she glanced up, giving me a small nod. You're on time. I smirked. Figure being late wouldn't make the best impression. She chuckled, gesturing to the seat across from her. Said I did, and for a moment there was silence as we both took sips of our coffee. It was weird sitting across from her like this at work. There was always a clear hierarchy here. It felt almost equal. I appreciate you coming, she finally said, setting her cup down. Of course, I replied. I'll admit I was a little surprised by the invite. She studied me for a moment. You're a hard worker, David. I see that, but I also see that you've been stuck. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I guess that's a fair assessment, she sighed, looking out the window. You understand that feeling more than you might think. I frowned slightly. She turned back to me. You probably assume I've always had it easy, that I climbed the ranks without much resistance. I shrugged. I mean, you the boss. She let out a soft laugh. I am, but it wasn't easy. It took me years to get here, and even when I did, it didn't mean the struggle stopped. I leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? She hesitated, then took another sip of her coffee. People look at me and see authority, power. They assume I didn't need anything from anyone. I nodded. That was exactly how I saw her at work, but the truth is, she exhaled, it's lonely. No one really sees me, David, not as a person, just as a title. I wasn't sure what to say to that. It was strange hearing her speak so openly. This was a side of Olivia I had never imagined existed. She looked at me again. That's why I was honest with you in the elevator. You seem different. How she tilted her head, like you actually listened, like you didn't just see me as the boss, but as a person. As willowed hard. I mean, I guess I just never thought of you any other way before that, but when you opened up, it changed things. She nodded slowly. That's why I wanted to have this conversation. I don't do this often, David, letting people in, but you. She hesitated. I feel like I can talk to you something about the way she said that made my chest tighten. I glanced down at my coffee. I get it, you know. She raised an eyebrow. Do you? I nodded. I mean, not on the same level, but I know what it's like to feel invisible, to work hard and still feel like no one really sees you. She studied me for a moment. Your ex? I stiffened slightly. Yeah, you mentioned in the elevator that she cheated. I allow a small breath. Yeah, I thought we were building something real. Turns out I was just an option. Olivia's expression softened. I'm sorry, I shrugged. It was a long time ago. That doesn't make it hurt any less. I looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her voice. There was no judgment, no condescension, just understanding. For a moment, we just sat there in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt safe. Then she took another sip of her coffee and smirked slightly. So about that project? I let out a small laugh. Back to business already? She tilted her head. What, you thought this was a date? I felt my face heat up slightly. No, she chuckled. Relax, David, I'm just messing with you. I exhaled, shaking my head. You're impossible. She smiled, then leaned forward slightly. But for the record, I didn't enjoy this. I met her gaze. Yeah, me too. She nodded. Good. Then after a pause, she added, maybe we should do it again sometime. I hesitated, then nodded. Yeah, I'd like that. She seemed satisfied with that answer. And for the first time since I started working at the company, I realized that Olivia wasn't just my boss. She was something more. And I wasn't sure what that meant yet, but I was willing to find out. A few months had passed since that coffee meeting with Olivia. Things at work had changed, though not in an obvious way. I still did my job, still showed up on time, still put in the effort like I always had, but now Olivia noticed. She started involving me in more meetings, assigning me to bigger projects, even asking for my input on things she wouldn't have before. It wasn't just about the promotion, though. Yes, I had moved up in the company. The real shift was in how we saw each other. We started grabbing coffee more often than dinners. Then one night she asked me over to her place. That was the night everything changed. I remember standing at her doorstep, feeling like I had just stepped into something I wasn't sure I was ready for. It wasn't nerves, not exactly. It was more like an awareness that this was different, that she was different. Olivia opened the door, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. Her usual sharpness softened. You made it, she said, stepping aside to let me in. Her Apartment was modern but wore minimalist furniture, clean lines, a few personal touches that made it feel lived in. I had never imaged in her space before, but somehow this fit. She poured us both a glass of wine and we sat in her living room talking like we always did, but this time it felt heavier, like we were both aware of something neither of us had said out loud yet. Then she looked at me. David, something in her tone made my chest tighten. Yeah. She hesitated. Do you regret this? I frowned. Regret what? She exhaled, swirling the wine in her glass. Us, whatever this is. I leaned forward. Olivia, we haven't even defined what this is yet. She let out a small laugh, but there was something almost nervous about it that was rare for her. I know, she admitted, but we both know it's something. I set my glass down. Do you regret it? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked at me, really looked at me, like she was trying to figure out if I was worth the risk. Then, finally, she shook her head. No, I don't. I let out of breath. I didn't realize I'd been holding good because I don't either. Something in her shoulders relaxed at that. David, this isn't exactly normal, a boss and an employee. I know, I said, cutting her off gently, but we're not just that anymore, are we? She was silent for a moment, then she reached out, her fingers brushing against mine. It was subtle, barely even a touch, but it was enough to tell me that whatever we were, whatever this was turning into, it was real. After that night, we were careful at work. Nothing changed. We were professional, kept things discreet, but outside of work we were together. It wasn't some whirlwind, reckless romance. It was slow, intentional. It was stolen moments and quiet conversations, late night dinners and early morning texts. It was Olivia letting herself be with someone after years of keeping her walls up. And it was me realizing that for the first time since my ex, I actually wanted something real. Again, a year later, I found myself standing in her apartment watching her make coffee in the kitchen, and it hit me, this was my life now. I had the career I had worked for, I had the respect I had wanted, and I had her. I never could have predicted that getting stuck in an elevator would change my life, but sometimes the moments that seem like nothing at first, they end up meaning everything.